This week we're diving into how pro-EU voices are finally pushing back against the Brexit nonsense.
Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. My job is to bring this country together now and take us forward. This is the moment when we really begin to unite and level up. We want this to be the beginning of a new era of friendly cooperation between the EU and an energetic Britain.
And now for something completely different.
And incredible what Richard Tice is saying there, because what we've seen with Brexit, under every single metric, our country is poorer. It's a fact. And everything we're trying to do on the outside of that is just, nibbling away at the edges. So when people say we have no money in our pockets, Brexit and what you stood for has caused that.
Absolutely.
Hang on. Richard, you have to let people have their say.
And in so many ways, the far right don't want you to have a say. They want to shout out slurs about your character and how you look at Britain, suggesting that you're a traitor because you want closer relations with the European Union. So it was interesting to see this week that in the media, several commentators had had enough. That included James O'Brien, Andrew Marr, and Femi Oluwole. All of them either hammered or owned Brexiteers this week. Let's have a listen to Femi.
Hosts its first EU summit since Brexit today, as the Prime Minister attempts to reset relations, paving the way for a wider agreement with Brussels. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says that today's expected deal with the European Union would be a win for jobs and bills and borders.
But many, including several of today's papers, as you can see, think it's a betrayal of the Brexit vote and a step closer to the UK joining.
The polling has shown people are regretting their vote and they want to rejoin the European Union. That between 55 and 58% want to rejoin. And I'm showing this because these two have just instantly made it out as if the majority want to remain outside the European Union. It is bizarre.
Well, political commentator and former MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg says the UK should not surrender to the European Union, while political writer and activist Femi Oluwole says the democratic licence for Brexit has expired. Femi, the country voted to leave the EU. How on earth is this government going to take us back in?
So, we can debate another time whether or not it was democratic to have a referendum on our relationship with the EU before people could actually see what that relationship would be. And then once the Brexit deal was negotiated and everybody, including Brexit supporters, hated it, refusing to let people vote on it.
That's not true.
But you will lose that debate.
Hang on, you lost the vote, Femi, back in 2016.
Yeah.
And now it looks like the government is going to take us into a closer alliance with the organisation we came out of.
Let me be absolutely clear. I do not care about betraying a Brexit vote from 10 years ago.
You don't care about democracy?
You know why? Because I care a hell of a lot more about the record levels of people that are currently in poverty than I care about the wishes from 10 years ago of people, many of whom are dead.
I might have gone for the fact that people don't want it anymore, have changed their minds, and that's part of democracy, but boom. That's a drop, and it, I think, threw everyone off, and it also set off Susanna.
Now, people are in poverty. The UK is facing a record cost of living crisis, and I care a lot more about that. I mean, the debate about whether or not Brexit is good or bad for working people, whether or not it's making us richer or poorer, that's over, because your lot have said it is making us poorer. Boris Johnson said it's that.
Well, let's let Annunziata say what she
That's quite simply not true.
Except here's a ton of evidence showing that is the case, that they were all complaining about it because no one had one idea of what Brexit should be.
I see the withdrawal agreement as much worse than Remain.
So as promised, the whole point in the video was to show a Brexiteer getting owned and highlight that pro-EU folks are just done with all the nonsense. And Femi is about to call out Rees-Mogg for not being an expert, but also that's why I just showed you those clips. It's because they're using false facts and they're lying and they're not being held to account.
I'm really worried because right now there's somebody on your program who supported one of the most economically damaging policies in UK history. In fact, she even supported no-deal Brexit, saying it would save £80 billion a year. I mean, we can all see the damage Brexit has already done, and they're giving economic advice on national television.
I just
want you to know that that's happening on your show.
Okay, but
You just don't
but you've got to respect Annunziata's opinion.
On economics?
And she speaks
on economics,
for many...
she said no deal Brexit would save us £80 billion a year. There is no major economy on the planet.
I just want to point out, that the majority so far of the viewers who have got in touch with us agree with Annunziata.
But a poll done by Good Morning Britain on Twitter is not the same as it being done by a professional company. I also found this: 68% of Scots do not want to be outside the EU. That's an untenable number, and yet completely ignored by people at Good Morning Britain. Now, bearing in mind that GMB have given off the impression that everything's equal about the economy and people's attitude towards Brexit, or if not slanted in favour of Brexit, even though the stats don't show that, have a listen to Emily Maitlis bring this point up.
To early 2016, the UK is beginning to debate the big questions around Britain's potential exit from the EU. It's complicated stuff. We're trying to offer our viewers both sides of a fiendishly difficult debate, and that intention was right. But we still got it wrong. We fell into what we might call the Patrick Minford paradigm. In other words, it might take our producers 5 minutes to find 60 economists who feared Brexit and 5 hours to find a sole economic voice who espoused it. But by the time we went on air, we simply had one of each. We presented this unequal effort to our audience as if it was balance. It wasn't.
And the defence is that someone like Rees-Mogg should be allowed to say whatever they want about the economy because she has feelings towards it, even though she lies about the facts.
I need to make the point that Annunziata is making a view heard, or trying to, which a lot of people who voted for Brexit agree with.
By 45
and the people who have got in touch with us this morning have not died. They are still living voters who feel that their democratic decision is now being overturned.
Except the promises made in Brexit were lies. We were offered a Ferrari and we got a Ferrari with the engine of a Ford. It shrank the economy. We were offered $350 million a week for the NHS. It never turned up. And yet Susanna glosses smoothly over all these lies that were offered to people about the improvements of Brexit.
Even if things did go wrong, let's just assume that things went wrong.
Yeah.
But the worst case scenario, economically, is better than where we are today. If we vote for Brexit, we'll save this industry.
By 45 to 9, Brexit voters believe that Brexit has made us poorer. As for no deal Brexit, which was supported by you, there is no major economy on the planet that has no trade deal with its closest neighbours, which means she supported doing something that every successful economy on the planet...
You don't need to talk about Annunziata in the third person,
which means
she's right in front of you.
You can talk to me, but you can also let me speak.
You supported something.
Okay, now let Annunziata...
You supported... Let me finish my point, please. You supported something that every successful economy on the planet has chosen specifically not to do.
It really feels that nothing has changed in the media. They haven't learned their lessons and they're still putting forward these arguments that Emily Maitlis put forward as bad journalism. And with that, Andrew Marr goes on an absolute attack of the language being used by far-right elements in British politics and media.
I'm a pretty gentle, relaxed, herbivorous kind of woodland creature. I don't get hot under the collar about much, but I'm getting hot this evening, and it is at the ludicrous, offensive and unpatriotic language being thrown around by the Brexit right against this new deal with the EU. Surrender, humiliation, sellout, betrayal. And all of this, note, because Keir Starmer has agreed to continue the fishing deal, first struck by Boris Johnson in his Brexit heyday for another dozen years. Johnson now regards that as apparently so disgraceful, he's resorted to spewing out bizarre sexual metaphors about the Prime Minister. Maybe he's trying to tell us something. Anyway, yes, fishermen are angry, and yes, they would like to exclude French and other European trawlers from more British water. But this is a deal which should make the whole country better off. Will bring good industrial jobs, give us better energy security, and in the shops, more choice and lower prices. It'll make it easier, we hope, to get through passport controls and to do deals to help combat illegal migration. So, betrayal? Fishing accounts for 0.03% of our output, and the deal will anyway make it easier for British fishermen to sell their produce abroad. Talking about surrender and betrayal is the language not of deal-making, but of war, and that is deranged. We're not at war with the European Union or France. We have been negotiating with them, give and take to increase prosperity. The Brexiteers have cost the economy, that is, you and me, around 4% of our GDP, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility. Bloomberg Economics, not exactly a wing of the Socialist Workers' Party, suggests it has cost Britain £100 billion every year in lost output. Brexiteers have been arguing today that the extra boost to the British economy from this deal, £9 billion a year, is nothing like enough. But they're also arguing at just the same time it goes too far. So, do a smaller deal for a bigger result? None of this makes sense.
Did we hear any of that from Susanna and Richard? No, we didn't hear a word, even though we also know that Susanna was fuming with Nigel Farage over the Brexit bus.
The £350 million a week we send to the EU, which we will no longer send to the EU, can you guarantee that's going to go to the NHS?
No, I can't, and I would never have made that claim.
17 million people have voted for leave.
Yep.
Based, I don't know how many people voted on the basis of that advert, but that was a huge part of the propaganda. You're now saying that's a mistake.
Finally, another Brexiteer getting completely owned.
Well, I'm not a politician. That's not my expertise.
No, but if you don't have a view on that...
I would certainly have sealed the borders up.
Apart from somehow sealing our borders, when I ask you what you could or what any politician could have done differently, you've got nothing.
I haven't got nothing. I'm not an expert on how I would seal the borders.
No, well, let's forget about sealing the borders and talk about how Brexit could have gone better.
Sealing the borders is not the right word.
Well, I think they were yours. Apart from immigration, how could Brexit have gone better?
Apart from immigration?
Yeah.
By having control of your own country, which I wouldn't know whether we have or not, and not being ruled by Europe.
In what way? Give me an example of that, would you?
I can't give you an example.
Does that not embarrass you?
I am slightly embarrassed because I'm not an expert. I'm
Do you know who else isn't an expert on this?
You.
No, I am. Ask me anything. Every single person who's encouraged you to support Brexit, there's not a single expert among them, and yet you're still trusting them instead of the people who are being proved right about everything. And I hear the chuckle, and that means that you're not someone who's been desperately affected by Brexit. You're not someone whose business has been shut down. You're someone who lies awake in bed in Middlesex having weird dreams about immigrants. You're not someone who's had...
You're very rude to me, aren't you?
Well, I am very rude to you, yes, because of what you've done to my country.
What I've done.
And now you're here to tell me you've got no clue about anything.
What have I done? I voted for Brexit. It was 51% against 49%.
You voted for Brexit, and you still cling to the carcass that it could somehow have gone well. And apart from making life difficult for people who don't look like you haven't got a single clue what that means, what you want, or how you'd go about getting it. So how on earth, Richard, could I not be rude to you?
Well, a lot of people are rude to me because I've got very strong views on certain things.
No, it's not because you've got very strong views, Richard. It's because you can't explain a single one of them.
So we had Brexit. People are saying after Brexit that British people don't trust experts anymore. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that British people have strong opinions based on nothing at all. Strong opinions.
We need to get on board and push back against the Brexit misinformation machine, just like folks in the US are standing up to MAGA. We're here to set the record straight and show that the tide is turning. Join us if you want to be part of it. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.